Story 1: The Abandoned Hospital. I was 17 when I followed a group of friends into an abandoned hospital on the edge of town. The building had been closed for years, its windows shattered and walls covered in graffiti. Everyone joked around as we pushed past the rusted metal doors, but something about the stale air made me uneasy. The deeper we went, the colder it became. Our flashlights flickered against broken gurneys and overturned wheelchairs, creating twisted shadows that seemed to move. Then, we all heard a loud bang echo from the third floor above us. My friends laughed nervously, but no one wanted to admit they were scared. Curiosity got the better of us, and we climbed the stairs. That's when we saw a wheelchair slowly rolling across the hallway. Even though no one was there to push it, it squeaked as it moved, stopping right at the door we had just come through. None of us spoke. We bolted, tripping over debris as we raced outside. When I finally looked back, the doors we had forced open were now shut tight. To this day, I swear I heard faint whispers calling my name as we fled into the night. Story 2: The Farmhouse in the Woods. One summer, I went exploring deep into the woods near my grandparents' cabin. That's when I stumbled upon an old farmhouse, boarded up and forgotten. My curiosity won, and I pried open a side window to climb inside. The air smelled of mold and rotting wood. Dust coated everything, chairs, books, and even old family portraits on the walls. What unsettled me most was that the dining table was still set, as if the family had gotten up mid-meal and never returned. I tried to laugh it off, but the silence pressed in heavy. As I turned the corner, I heard slow footsteps upstairs. My stomach dropped. No one was supposed to be here. I froze, trying to convince myself it was just the house creaking. But then the steps grew louder, deliberate, as if someone was walking straight toward me. I bolted out through the window, scraping my arms as I fell outside. When I glanced back, a pale figure stood at the upstairs window, watching me. The farmhouse has since been demolished, but I'll never forget those eyes. Story 3: The Tunnel. In college, a group of us decided to explore an abandoned drainage tunnel under the city. Everyone brought flashlights and spray paint, excited to mark the walls with graffiti. The tunnel stretched far deeper than we expected, and soon the daylight behind us disappeared. The air grew damp and heavy, and the sound of dripping water echoed endlessly. Our voices bounced back distorted, like whispers coming from somewhere else. I began to feel uneasy, but no one wanted to be the first to turn back. That's when we noticed strange markings, symbols scratched into the concrete. As we studied them, the temperature dropped sharply. Then, from deep inside the tunnel, we heard laughter. It wasn't playful, it was low, guttural, and mocking. We froze, shining our lights into the darkness, but nothing was there. Suddenly, one of our flashlights flickered out. Then another. Panic set in, and we sprinted back the way we came. When we finally burst into the night air, every single light was dead. Not one of us ever went back to that tunnel. Story 4: The Motel Room. I used to work as a delivery driver, and one night I had to drop off a package near an abandoned motel. The building was supposed to be empty, but curiosity got the better of me, and I stepped inside. The wallpaper peeled from the walls, and broken furniture lay scattered across the rooms. One door stood out. It was locked while all the others were wide open. I forced it, and inside I found a perfectly clean room. The bed was neatly made, the lamp worked, and even a suitcase sat in the corner. It was as if someone was still staying there. I barely had time to process it before I heard the bathroom door creak. My heart raced as I saw the outline of someone standing inside, motionless. I didn't wait for them to move. I sprinted out of that room, my footsteps echoing down the hallway. As I reached my car, I heard a window slam shut behind me. When I looked back, the curtains of that room swayed gently, as if someone had just peeked out to watch me leave. Story 5: The Cemetery Dare. In high school, my friends dared me to cut through an old cemetery after dark. It was fenced off, but I climbed over anyway, determined to prove I wasn't scared. The night was quiet except for the rustling of leaves, and the gravestones cast long, eerie shadows under the moonlight. Halfway through, I noticed fresh flowers laid on a grave, though the cemetery had been abandoned for decades. That's when I heard a woman's voice softly humming nearby. My blood ran cold. The sound grew louder, circling me, though no one was there. I stumbled forward and tripped, falling against a cracked tombstone. When I looked up, a tall shadow stood between the graves, its head tilted unnaturally as if it were watching me. I couldn't move. I felt rooted in place, unable to breathe. Finally, my body reacted, and I scrambled back to the fence, cutting my hands as I climbed. When I hit the ground on the other side, the humming stopped. But I swear, even now, sometimes I hear in my dreams. Story 6, The Water Tower. When I was a teenager, some friends and I decided to climb an abandoned water tower on the edge of town. The ladder was rusted and slick, but we made it to the top. From up there, we could see the entire city, quiet and glowing in the distance. We laughed and shouted into the night, but then I noticed something strange inside the tower itself. The hatch was slightly open and a faint light flickered within, like a lantern swaying. None of us had brought anything like that. Curiosity got the best of me, and I leaned in closer. That's when I heard whispering echoing up from inside the tank. It was faint, almost like children reciting a prayer. My stomach knotted, and I backed away fast. Before we climbed down, the hatch slammed shut with a bang, so loud it echoed through the metal structure. We didn't stop running until we were far away. I still wonder who or what was inside. Story 7, The Train Yard. I once explored an abandoned train yard with a buddy of mine. Rows of rusted locomotives stood silent, their paint peeling and windows shattered. It felt like walking through a graveyard of steel giants. We climbed into one of the cars, and the air was thick with dust. Old newspapers littered the floor, yellowed and crumbling at the edges. I picked one up. It was dated decades ago, yet it felt as if someone had just been reading it. As we moved to the next car, we both froze. A man's voice called out, "Get out," but echoed strangely, like it came from everywhere at once. We shined our flashlights, but there was no one there. The silence afterward was crushing. Then we heard heavy footsteps running across the roof of the train above us. They stopped right over our heads. That was enough. We bolted into the night, never daring to step foot in that yard again. Story 8, The Old School. There was an abandoned elementary school in my neighborhood that everyone said was haunted. One night, I decided to sneak inside. The hallways smelled of mildew, and lockers hung open like mouths frozen mid-scream. The classrooms were filled with broken desks and old chalkboards still scribbled with lessons from long ago. What unsettled me was the faint sound of children laughing down the hall. It echoed, but the building was supposed to be empty. I followed the sound to the gymnasium. The basketball hoop creaked overhead, swaying slightly though the air was still. On the bleachers, I saw faint impressions, as though people were sitting there, but the seats were empty. Suddenly, a ball rolled across the floor, stopping right at my feet. I dropped everything and sprinted out the nearest door, vowing never to step inside again. Story 9, The Cabin on the Hill. While hiking one fall afternoon, I stumbled upon a small cabin deep in the woods. Its roof sagged, and the front door hung crooked on its hinges. Against my better judgment, I stepped inside. The first thing I noticed was the smell, rotting meat, thick and nauseating. Flies buzzed around, and on the table lay animal bones arranged in strange patterns. My stomach turned, but I couldn't look away. As I explored further, I saw symbols carved into the wooden walls, all of them circling the fireplace. And inside the fireplace itself was a pile of ash that still looked fresh, as though something had burned there recently. Just then, the door slammed shut behind me. I panicked and forced it open, running until my lungs burned. I never told anyone where that cabin was. I'm not sure I could find it again even if I wanted to. Story 10, The Sewer Entrance. Back in high school, we found an open sewer entrance near the riverbank. Everyone dared each other to go inside, so I volunteered. The tunnel smelled of rust and decay, and the sound of dripping water echoed endlessly. The walls were slick with slime, and rats skittered past my feet. I was ready to turn back when I noticed handprints smeared across the concrete. They weren't old, they were fresh, wet, and leading deeper inside. I followed them for only a few steps before I heard breathing. Not mine. Something else, heavy and ragged, just beyond the circle of my flashlight. My skin crawled and my legs froze in place. When the breathing turned into a low growl, I bolted, scraping my knees as I climbed out. By the time I emerged into the night, my friends had vanished, leaving me shaken and alone. Story 11. The Burned House. On the outskirts of town stood a house that had burned years ago. Locals said a family died inside, but no one rebuilt it. One evening, I slipped through the charred doorway, my flashlight beam slicing through the blackened ruins. The walls were scorched, and the smell of smoke still lingered. Strangely, some belongings remained untouched. A child's doll on the stairs, photograph half melted but still recognizable. My chest tightened as I stepped deeper inside. In the living room, I heard faint crying. It sounded like a child, muffled but close. I froze, my flashlight trembling in my hand, as I followed the sound. It led me straight to the corner of the room, where nothing stood but ashes. Suddenly, the crying stopped, replaced by a shrill scream that made my ears ring. I dropped my flashlight and ran, refusing to look back. To this day, I swear I felt small hands grab my ankle as I fled. Story 12. The Factory Floor. There was an abandoned factory in my city where thrill seekers often trespassed. One night, I went with a few friends. Rusted machines sat silent, their gears frozen in time. The air reeked of oil and damp metal. We climbed onto the factory floor, our footsteps echoing through the cavernous space. Suddenly, we heard clanging like machinery starting up. But everything around us was broken, covered in dust. My heart pounded. We approached a massive conveyor belt, and to our horror, it was moving. Broken scraps rolled along it, as if someone had turned the power back on. Yet the control panel was smashed, wires dangling lifelessly. As the belt groaned louder, we heard footsteps pounding toward us from the shadows. We ran for the exit, but behind us, the machines roared to life one by one. The factory hasn't had electricity for decades. Story 13. The Church Ruins. In the woods behind my old neighborhood lay the ruins of a church, its steeple collapsed and pews rotting in the dirt. I snuck in one night, curious about the legends of strange rituals held there. The altar was cracked, and broken glass crunched beneath my shoes. Symbols had been carved into the stone walls, fresh ones, not old graffiti. Someone had been here recently, and my stomach knotted with unease. As I stood near the altar, a sudden gust of cold air swept past me, carrying whispers in a language I couldn't understand. My skin prickled, and the shadows in the corners seemed to stretch unnaturally long. I turned to leave, but standing at the doorway was a tall figure, cloaked in black. Its face was hidden, but I felt its gaze pierce through me. I bolted into the forest, not stopping until I reached home. Story 14. The Storm Drain. A friend and I once crawled into a massive storm drain that ran beneath our town. It was wide enough to walk through, but the deeper we went, the darker and colder it became. Our flashlights barely pierced the blackness ahead. At first we saw graffiti and trash, the usual signs of kids hanging out. But then we found something else. Candles melted into the concrete, arranged in strange circles. My throat tightened as the air grew heavy. We heard a faint scraping behind us, like nails dragging against the tunnel walls. Each step echoed louder, closer. We spun around, but the tunnel was empty. At least it looked empty. That's when a whisper hissed my friend's name, low and drawn out. We bolted, slipping and stumbling until we finally saw daylight again. When we turned back, the tunnel was silent, as if nothing had followed us. Story 15. The Empty Theater. I once trespassed into an abandoned movie theater downtown. The marquee still displayed films from the early 2000s, faded and broken. Inside, the smell of mildew and stale popcorn filled the air. The seats were torn, and the screen was yellowed and peeling. Yet as I stood there, the projector suddenly whirred to life. A beam of light shot across the theater, but no film was loaded. The blank light still flickered across the screen. Then, faintly, the sound of an audience erupted. Applause, laughter, coughing, all around me, though every seat was empty. My breath caught in my throat, and I spun in circles, searching for the source. As quickly as it began, everything went silent again. The projector switched off by itself, leaving me in darkness. I didn't wait to find out what came next. 16. The Abandoned Asylum Incident. I had always been drawn to urban exploration, so when I heard about the old asylum on the outskirts of town, I couldn't resist. One evening, my friends and I decided to venture inside. The building was eerily silent and the air was thick with dust. As we explored, we stumbled upon a room with fresh footprints leading into it, yet no one was there. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind us, trapping us inside. We managed to escape, but the unsettling feeling lingered and we never spoke of it again. 17. The Silent Watcher. Late one night, I was walking home from a friend's house when I noticed a figure standing motionless in the distance. Thinking it was just my imagination, I continued walking. As I got closer, the figure remained still, and I felt a chill run down my spine. I crossed the street to avoid them, but they mirrored my movements, staying on the opposite side. I quickened my pace, and so did they. I finally reached my house and turned around to see the figure standing at the end of the street, watching me. I never saw them again. 18. The Hidden Room. While renovating an old house I had purchased, I discovered a hidden door behind a bookshelf. Curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it. Inside was a small, dimly lit room with old furniture covered in sheets. What caught my eye was a large mirror on the wall. As I approached it, I noticed a faint reflection of a person standing behind me. I spun around, but no one was there. I quickly left the room and sealed the door, but the image in the mirror haunted me for weeks. 19. The Uninvited Guest. During a family gathering, we noticed a man standing outside our window, staring into the house. At first, we thought he was lost, so my brother went outside to speak with him. The man didn't respond and just kept staring. My brother tried to approach him, but the man suddenly turned and ran into the woods behind our house. We called the police, but by the time they arrived, he was gone. To this day, we wonder who he was and what he wanted. 20. The Noisy Neighbor. I had just moved into a new apartment and was settling in when I started hearing strange noises at night. At first, I thought it was just the building settling, but the sound became more distinct. Footsteps, whispers, and the occasional knock on the walls. One night, I decided to investigate and knocked on my neighbor's door. To my surprise, no one answered. I asked the building manager about it, and they informed me that the apartment had been vacant for months. The noises stopped after that, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was watching me. If you're interested in more tales of eerie encounters and unsettling experiences, feel free to ask. 21. The Cabin in the Woods. I was hiking with friends when we stumbled upon an old, abandoned cabin deep in the woods. Curiosity got the better of us, so we decided to explore. Inside, the air smelled of mold and decay, and furniture was overturned as if someone had left in a hurry. As I walked toward the back room, I heard faint whispers, though we were alone. When I turned around, a shadow darted past the doorway, and we ran without looking back. 22. The Rooftop Stalker. One night, I decided to sneak onto the rooftop of my apartment building to get a better view of the city lights. It was quiet at first, but then I heard someone crawling behind me. I froze, straining to see, and noticed a pair of glowing eyes staring at me from the shadows. Heart pounding, I climbed down the ladder as fast as I could. When I got to the ground, the door to the roof was locked from the inside. Someone had been waiting for me up there. 23. The Basement Door. I was house-sitting for a friend and found a locked door in the basement that I'd never noticed before. The latch was old but easily gave way, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. As I stepped inside, I heard something scuttling in the shadows, like dozens of small feet. A chill ran down my spine when I realized the walls were covered in strange scratches and symbols. I slammed the door shut and refused to go back down there, even when my friend called later. 24. The Empty Playground. I was exploring a closed-down park at dusk, just for fun. The swings creaked in the wind, though the air was still. As I walked across the playground, I saw a figure sitting on a slide, hunched over, completely still. I called out, but it didn't move or respond. When I took a step closer, it vanished, leaving only a faint echo of laughter. I bolted out of there and haven't been back, but the memory of that empty, watching figure still haunts me. 25. The Locked Attic. While cleaning out an old family friend's house, I noticed a door to the attic that was always locked. One day, I found it slightly ajar and couldn't resist peeking inside. The attic was filled with boxes, but one corner looked recently disturbed. I heard soft breathing and the faintest footsteps behind me, though no one else was in the house. Terrified, I ran downstairs, locked the door, and left. Later, I learned no one had been in the house for weeks.